He'll make it for sure. Now that's why I backed him on TABtouch.
Hey, Luke.
Yes, Gene Simmons?
He's probably the best when it comes to this stuff.
Thanks, Gene.
You've got the touch. You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
Hello and welcome to Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle, and all of a sudden we're 2 weeks out from the NBL finals starting, or at least knowing how the top six will be made up, and we might have got some answers from what we saw in round 18. So we saw the Tasmania JackJumpers cement their spot and make a bit of a statement. The Illawarra Hawks took a big leap forward, and I think we might be ready. I'll ask my co-host to rule out 3 more teams from the race. The New Zealand Breakers impressed, but boy is it horrible news what happened to Anthony Lamb, and the Sydney Kings and the Brisbane Bullets still think they're searching for some answers. We saw plenty of dunks, plenty of whistles, plenty of frustrations, plenty of excitement, and had a bit of everything once again, and now we get ready for these last 2 rounds. I'm Chris Pike, but I'm joined once again by the former South East Melbourne Phoenix coach. Very, very excited to get his thoughts on how everything's playing out. Simon Mitchell, thanks for joining me once again.
Appreciate the invite, Chris. It's you missed out plenty of Biff.
Yes, I did. We'll get to it. We might have some added candidates for our fight night as well. So we'll get to that, because you've been part of this. Now that your seasons are on the line, the frustrations at this point in the season start to spill over, because there's just so much at stake in every game, isn't there?
Oh, it really is. Saw last weekend, you mentioned earlier that there's 3 teams that probably put a line through now, and after this weekend, there's very well might be putting a line through 2 more teams. So it's every moment of every game matters, and players are going to fight for that moment.
Now, as always, we're here thanks to Hoop7. So if you need any of your basketball goods or shoes, head to hoop7.com.au, or if you're in Perth, and right now, Simon, if you're willing to brave the 40-degree heat that we're going through seemingly every day, head to the store on Murray Street, and also go to TABtouch and try to find yourself some winners. Head to tabtouch.com.au or download the TABtouch app. Plenty for us to talk about. Some of the big talking points that stood out, we'll go through everything in a bit more detail one by one, Simon, but 2 big wins for the JackJumpers that absolutely cemented them, and I can't see them moving from 3rd spot now. So they were impressive, and the best part for them was being able to string wins together. I couldn't have been more impressed with the New Zealand Breakers in Perth with what they did, but yeah, like I said, losing Anthony Lamb is a massive blow. Illawarra Hawks, they inched closer to locking in a top 4 spot. Like we touched on, I reckon we can rule out the Taipans, the Phoenix, and the 36ers. What stood out to you from what we saw in round 18?
I think the JackJumpers coming good at the right time of year, with 2 authoritative performances.
Yeah,
everything you want to see from the JackJumpers they produced. Got their big 3, came out to play and were fantastic. And then you saw the guys, not so much lesser life, but the role players on the team come out to fulfill their roles, led especially by Will Magnay.
Yes,
and if they collectively can fire at this end of the season, and look, I'd love to see them run the table between now and the end of the year, even if that includes final squad SEM getting the beat, but getting the loss. But I would love to see it, because I'd love to see that 3rd team that's really pushing for a championship. Because right now we've got 2 teams and then a bunch of also-rans trying to make the 4. So the JackJumpers very impressive for mine.
Yeah, no, they were. What we've seen from them all season, we might talk to them about them a bit later in more detail, but they seem to put together one good performance and one average performance. But those 2 performances on the weekend, to go up to Cairns and do what they did and pretty much end the season of the Taipans, and then to come back and take care of business and basically end the season of Adelaide. So they basically ended the season of those 2 teams. But to string games together, that's what they haven't been able to do, but it's a pretty good sign at the right time.
Yeah, it's not just collecting the wins; it's the manner in which they did it.
Sure.
And as you said, they've knocked out teams from the playoff run for all intents and purposes, and that's a sign of a team that you want to see teams closing other teams out and eliminating them. And they had the opportunity and they took care of their business. Tremendous effort from Scott Roth and those boys.
I'll run through the results shortly from round 18, but before we do, we got some good feedback from some of our players we nominated to be part of our fight night last week, Simon, including Mitch Creek was very, very keen for his battle with with Mason Peatling, and he sent through a video of him already training, so he's already getting ready. Did you hear from him? Did he get in touch with you after that?
No, I haven't heard from Mitch. I didn't realise that, but I know he does love his boxing.
Yes.
We've had lots of conversations about it, and it'd be a bit one-sided, I think, for whoever stepped in.
Yes. I reckon we got a couple more candidates, and this first fight, this will be a fascinating clash of styles, a clash of weight divisions, but after what we saw up in Cairns between the two of them, I think they'd be keen to get it on. Will Magnay and Tajir McCall. What do you think?
Geez, that's an interesting one. Magnay, the body beautiful, the athlete, the Frank Bruno of boxing, perhaps. It looks like he might have all the tools getting into the ring, but maybe doesn't throw them all the time. And Oliver McCall, well, sorry, Tajir McCall. I called him Oliver McCall, who used to be a boxer. I've got to get my head out of the ring. But he doesn't remind me of Oliver, because Oliver, he had that meltdown in the ring and walked out and never fought again. Unfortunately, fell on hard times. But, yeah, Tajir likes to take a dive once in a while. So I might give him the Sonny Liston award and make him Sonny Liston.
He might not come up off his stool, yeah. The other one's very interesting. Jesse Wagstaff and Finn Delaney. Jesse tried to take a trademark charge on Sunday from Finn, and when they were having words and pointing fingers afterwards, I had no idea if they were about to laugh at each other, if they were about to hug each other, or if they were about to come to blows. I have no idea what was going on, but this one would be very interesting because I have a feeling one of them might go down pretty easily without necessarily too much contact.
I'm not going to differentiate between those. That might be a little bit. Your Red Army might throw missiles at me next time. Look, I love both those blokes, the way they go about it, but I don't think I want to see either of them in the ring anytime doing that. That might be more of a bit of a wrestling match. I don't think it'd be a good fight. I don't think it'd be a pretty fight. I think Wagstaff would be tying up his opponent all game long.
He absolutely.
The referee would be busy. The referee would be very busy trying to separate them. So, I'll leave that one alone. They don't remind me of anybody.
No, they don't. And you're right. It wouldn't be the sort of thing anyone wants to see. It would end up on the ground probably just holding each other, and it'd get very boring.
It was more like they wanted to buy each other dinner than have a fight, I thought.
Yeah, I couldn't work it out. They had big smiles on their faces, but at the same time, sometimes that hides a little bit of ill feeling. But I have no idea what was going on. But let's get on to more serious matters. So what we saw across round 18, we saw a lot of things get sorted out. So it started up in far north Queensland, and the Tasmania JackJumpers, as we talked about, beat the Cairns Taipans 94-86, and then we saw Adelaide 36ers did it again against the Sydney Kings, 85-78. And then we saw Illawarra Hawks beat the Brisbane Bullets. I'm interested to talk about this one with you. They beat them 89-76, but I can't help but feeling frustrated with the Bullets to blow another one from a good position. And then we saw a really competitive Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. I think full credit to them, even though it's a 16-point loss to Melbourne United. And then the JackJumpers, as we talked about, did it again back home, 109-86 over the 36ers. And finally, full credit to the New Zealand Breakers, beat the Perth Wildcats in Perth, 89-78. I want to start with the Breakers, Simon. It was a hell of a performance. I mean, I spent some time on the invitation of Mody Mayor with the team on Saturday once they were in Perth, and they had a training session in a gym that felt like it was probably 60 degrees inside it. They went down to the beach afterwards, and Mody was feeling great because he had his full team available for the first time all season. He got a training session in with his full group. He was excited to go into the game with his full group for the first time. One quarter into it, and Anthony Lamb, it didn't look good at the time. We've now since found out that probably what we all feared, that he's ruptured his Achilles, but they still got the job done with a really good performance in Perth. What did you make of what they did?
Oh, I thought they were excellent. It doesn't surprise me Perth got to put the air conditioners on there for
Yes.
From the get-go, they were pretty solid, New Zealand, at both ends of the floor. I thought, they really created great offensive transition opportunities against Perth. I thought pretty lackluster in that event. I thought their transition D was really bad. And maybe that should be the focus more than maybe Bryce supposedly being fouled off ball. But regardless, it's New Zealand and what they were able to do. And I thought they came with a great game plan. I think they really exploited the switching of Perth, and PJC was able to just take on whoever he wanted. The switching wasn't working, but Perth stuck with it, and they paid the price for it.
I want to talk about Parker Jackson Carr, right? Because to me, he's the only player in the league that has a very similar skill set to Bryce. I mean, he's probably as quick as him. He's got similar ball handling skills. He's got all the tools there, and he had a hell of a first half to set up that game. They didn't match up necessarily a hell of a lot, but he's the one player that can take it at Bryce. And gee, what he did in the first half really put the Breakers in a winning position.
Yeah, well, what I really liked was Modi puts him in a position to be successful.
Yes.
He runs him off different sets. He runs him off those Olafson cuts. They get him in the mid-cylinder, pick and rolls. They run some horns action for him. And they did try to get Bryce onto him a few times with the guard-to-guard screens. And Bryce he had the Matadors uniform on and just got to let him pass a few times. So I just thought that Modi really created an environment for PJC to be successful. And he was really aggressive and took care of it. And, we saw just how effective he was in transition. A couple of long rebounds came to him and he's off. You can't stay with him. So really great game from him. I thought he controlled the tempo from the get-go, and then the other guys sort of jumped on board for him.
Yeah. What I love is that Modi just has complete faith in him. How important as a coach, especially with your point guard or your main ball handler, is it to give your player that license? Because we saw him the week before, unfortunately, late in the game, I think it was against the Hawks, where he had the last possession where he could have either put the Breakers in front or tie scores, and he unfortunately dribbled it off his foot, and that was the game. But Modi has full faith. He put him back in those positions, and he knows that more often than not, he'll make the right play. I mean, how important as a coach is it to instill that confidence in the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands?
Oh, 100%, and it goes both ways. You want to have, as a coach, 100% confidence in the player that he can make the right decision at the right time, and lead the team when he needs to in a number of different ways, whether it's be creating for others or creating for himself, or being vocal, huddling the team up. They're the coach on the floor, and you want them to be if they have those abilities. And so, yeah, from a coaching standpoint, you just want to love your point guard. And from a point guard standpoint, it was many years ago since I last put on sneakers, but you want that investment from the coach as well. You want them to give you the keys to the car. You don't want them calling plays for you. You want to be able to make those decisions. You want the confidence of the coach. And PJC actually started off a little shaky, I guess. I think he missed his first four from the field, but there was no hesitation. They were good looks for the most part. There was no hesitation, or there was clearly none from Modi that, hey, maybe we can work it around for a better look. It's just, hey, keep plugging away. Those are good looks. I have my investment and confidence in you. So, yeah, look, there's clearly a great understanding between those two, and I thought Modi, it was a masterful performance from him from a coaching standpoint. And I thought Modi was as much of a difference as anybody else during the course of that game.
No, absolutely. They came with a clear game plan, and physicality was part of it. And I'm not buying into the fact that, the Wildcats have come out complaining about it since, about the physicality, but I think everything they did was legal. They just were physical in the right way, because I think, led by Mango Madiang as well, he probably showed Alex Sarr how to play like a man in this league, and what it takes to be physically imposing. And I know Cody's felt silly at times this year because he picked him to be Defensive Player of the Year and he just hasn't come close, mainly because he hasn't been allowed to with the whistle. But what Mango showed is that a physically imposing big man can take you a long way in this league.
Yeah, a couple of beautiful wall-ups at the rim early in the game too. And I said the Red Army, but he was straight up and protecting the rim, and wall contact through the chest, and even one in the mouth. I think got an elbow from in one of them. So yeah, look, I thought he really set the tone from that standpoint. In regards to the physicality of Bryce off the ball, I mean, there was very, very few moments of that, and they were pretty much all whistled pretty quickly. I think that might be just the sensitive Red Army calling out something that didn't exist. Now, New Zealand, what they did a wonderful job, I mean, they clearly put their time into Bryce, is that they focus on him, and it basically turns it into a game of 4-on-4.
Yep.
He gives space to other guys on the floor, and everybody sort of fed from that as well. You see dribble handoffs from Pinder that he rejects it because Bryce has been top locked, and he's able to get the space to go one-on-one and get himself on the rim. Even Jesse Wagstaff a couple of times found himself in space, wasn't able to finish, but because you're guarding Bryce off the ball, it just creates that extra space. There's no help defense there. And all the Perth guys were able to have a look, but even, their finishing wasn't great. But every time that someone else besides Bryce is shooting the ball, I think, the New Zealand coaching staff are tipping their hat at each other and saying, well done, sir.
Absolutely. Those are all the positives for the Breakers, I guess when you're in the middle of a game, you can make the adjustments when you lose a player, but Anthony Lamb is a massive loss. It's a horrible news for him to rupture his Achilles. We know what it means. It means that he's out of the game for 12 months, which is horrible for anybody. But I also think he's such a huge loss. I think behind Bryce, he's almost the hardest guard in the league to try to stop, because, I mean, he's got such offensive weapons. Do you see losing him now as being something that'll stop them reaching the top 6, or do you still think they can make it?
I think they got their work cut out for them. I think they can do it. One of the things that Lamb's been really good at is covering for other guys.
Yep.
In the absence of Finn Delaney and Zylan Cheatham, he's been able to play 2, 3, 4, 5. He's played every position on the floor, and he's offered genuine alternatives to those guys that have been missing. But those guys are back now. So with Cheatham back on the floor and looking like he's in pretty good touch, Finn Delaney will get better after every game. They still have the talent to cover for him. They're clearly not as good a basketball team with him not suiting up, but they still are a very talented and deep roster. And I'm hoping for New Zealand, the country. I'm hoping for New Zealand, the basketball team.
Yep.
And I want to advance the NBL, because I'd love to see them back in it, because I think they've got genuine talent. And we want to see some of these teams that maybe fall into the playoffs make a bit of a wave, I guess. And I think they're the team that's equipped to do it if they can get there.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they're even if they finish 6th, I think they're every chance to end up in a semi-final series and pushing either Melbourne or Perth to 3 games and making it difficult. So I think Cheatham is the interesting one. When he's up and going, he's more athletic and probably more explosive than anybody that he'll come up against. His shooting is reasonable enough where you do have to respect his shooting. He could be the guy that still picks up that slack and helps to cover for losing Lamb.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, he's a really talented athlete. As maybe we underestimate his skills a little bit, and that can be a bit of a fault on people when you see someone who's such an extreme athlete. You call him an athlete and not a basketballer. He's a basketballer. He can play the game. He pick his way through situations, and he makes pretty good decisions. He's fairly skilled. Yeah, he's a talented guy, and he's someone we've looked at very closely in the past at Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. So I've got a lot of time for Zion. We tried hard to get him one year, but he was right on the edge of making the NBA roster and wanted to stick with that. But yeah, I think he's a guy who can certainly step up his game and carry a bit more of a load for New Zealand in the absence of Anthony Lamb.
Sticking with that same game on Sunday, was it the pressure of trying to win for Damien Martin too much for the Wildcats, or did you see some concerning signs for them, or what did you make of their performance?
I'm a little bit concerned. I watched that game back again, and it kind of reminded me of the start of the season. Yeah. When they're trying to get other guys involved early, and Bryce was kind of found himself watching, on the third side of the floor, and it never quite got there. And he was, players are denying him anyways, and he had a couple looks early. He had 3 threes in that first quarter that weren't great looks. They were okay. They were mostly because of New Zealand blunders rather than Perth execution. The loss of Harris early to foul trouble, as someone who tried to genuinely get him involved. When Wagstaff was in there, just about every moment of the time he's out there on the floor, he's trying to think, how can I get Bryce involved? I'm not sure anybody else shares that attitude.
No.
I thought there was some signs there. But having said that, Harris is out of the game early. But yeah, look, I think the defensive transition was an abomination. Poor, really poor. And it needs to be a huge focus. Forget the physicality on Bryce. That's been overstated. It's a whinge. Move on. Focus on your defense, because that's poor right now. And their defensive transition really should have been lit up. New Zealand missed a couple of really easy shots at the rim. Mango missed a dunk and a layup, and a couple of guys missed some pretty easy makes at the rim that really could have put Perth under the hammer early in that first quarter. And for me, there's a little bit of concern. And I think that Perth need to show us a little something this round going into the finals.
It's an interesting game. I mean, they finished next weekend with 2 games on the road, but this weekend they've got a Cairns team that doesn't have a lot to play for. Would you like to see them really put the hammer on them? Is this the sort of game where a big win against Cairns will get them back on track?
I think Cairns would have really liked what they saw from New Zealand. They've got the personnel that can do some similar work.
Yeah, sure.
The ability of New Zealand to rotate players across, through guarding Bryce. Rooster Vicious. I've been trying all year not to say that, but he started on him, when Bryce was at the 2 to start the game. When Ty Webster comes out, Bryce goes to the 1. You see Liafa come into the game, and he puts a little bit more. He's able to put a bit more pressure up the floor and deny Bryce had played 8 minutes, although at that point already. And he's like, I really don't want to take this guy on fresh. And Say Liafa is someone who's had very good success against Bryce in the past. So Bryce was maybe lacking in a little bit of aggression when he came into the game. He was pretty happy to just throw it back to the Pinder or Wagstaff and let them bring the ball up the floor. And I think, we've talked about it previously with Cairns and their ability to throw players around defensively. Get some Patrick Miller, get a bit of size, a bit of weight to lean on Bryce a little bit. Got, obviously, Bull Quoll, who'll probably get the first chance to go at, they've got different bodies. And even Tajir McCall, with that wiry athleticism, gives a different look. So they're all different looks. And those different looks can help you stop a player get into rhythm. And I really like the matchup and the possibilities that they have there for Cairns. Now it's the mental barrier of trying to overcome what may be a dead season for them.
Yep, no, absolutely. All right, Simon, time to take a break. Plenty more to talk about. We'll move on from Perth and New Zealand after this, but let's hear from TABtouch and then we'll get stuck into the rest.
He'll make it for sure. That's why I backed him on TABtouch.
You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. I'm joined once again by Simon Mitchell. Talk a bit more about what we saw from the Tasmania JackJumpers, Simon, because like we talked about off the top, 2 really good wins. Going up to Cairns to get that win, coming back home to beat Adelaide. 2 teams playing for their lives, and we can mention Adelaide and coming off the back of travel. Scott Ninnis didn't do what CJ Bruton didn't blame the travel, but clearly Adelaide were tired on that Sunday, but Tasmania took full advantage, and full credit to the JackJumpers. And like you said, their 3 stars all played big weekends. Jordan Crawford was terrific, Jack McVeigh terrific, and Milton Doyle becoming more of a playmaker was terrific as well. A lot to like, and I think full credit to Scott Roth for getting his team to play much closer type of basketball to what he's been wanting them to see. I feel like they've been building towards this, and he's finally seeing his team probably putting out there what he wants to see.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I'm not sure they've been building towards it. I think they've been wildly consistent.
Yes. Forward
2 steps back almost. But, we mentioned it earlier, but I think the fact that they went in there and they went up to Cairns, which can always be difficult, difficult conditions to play in. It's a long road trip. They go up there, take care of their business against a team that needed to win, and then to travel back home and do the same against the 36ers, again, another team that needed to win. It's just a very good sign for the JackJumpers and the emphatic way that they did it. They were excellent on both sides of the ball, and their depth really shone through, I thought. Guys like who have maybe a little bit quiet in the season, like Clint Steindl, coming through in both games, playing well. We saw Sean McDonald, who's the most experienced development player in the history of the sport, come and play really well for them again. And those performances, I thought, were really, and along with Will Magnay, who was excellent. Those guys, along with the big 3, had unbelievable weekends. And if Tassie had those guys, all of them, going on the one night like they did, they're extremely tough to deal with.
You mentioned Magnay. We'll talk about him a bit more shortly once we get to our awards. But just quickly, in that game against Adelaide, and he's coming up against Isaac Humphries for a lot of this game, they were plus 31 in the 22 minutes he played. Sometimes plus minus can not be the greatest indicator, but on this occasion, that just highlights how important he is, because he gives them a post presence, he gives them a rim protector up the other end, but he's just playing with that confidence that he looks like he's almost back to that player that we saw him being before he went to the NBA, probably without the 3-point shot that we saw back then, but he's getting back to that player that we first saw going back 4 or 5 years.
I think he's a better player. I think he's a better player right now than he was even when we saw him in that little purple patch he had at Brisbane. I mean, he's, as you said, we know he's a rim protector. We know he's a great rim roller on the pick and roll. I think the important thing for him is he's stringing games together.
Yes.
And as I said, I think he's having a career best season, and he's doing it in 18 minutes a game, and it's crazy. He's just all 70% from the field, 10 points, 7 boards, over 1.5 blocks, and that's everything you want out of your centre in the modern game. They've got that versatility with him and Marcus Lee. They get the rim protection and the athletic side of that. And, they're firing really well, and he's been a huge, huge reason for their weekend.
Do you like the way that Scott is now having his 3 stars? So you got Milton Doyle, Jordan Crawford, Jack McVeigh playing. It looks like they're all, the longer they play together this season, the more they're all finding their roles. I mean, Milton's becoming more and more of a playmaker and not as much of a scorer. Jordan's the guy that can light it up, and then Jack does what Jack does. And I think he's probably having a career best season as well. He's getting better every year that he plays. I mean, do you like the way they're using their 3 stars?
Yeah, I do. I think the more you've got the ball in Doyle's hands, particularly down the stretch of games, the better you are setting up your team for success. I think getting the ball out of Crawford's hands at times is also really effective. You know, you get through that little bit of a lean patch, keeping him fresh, allowing some of the responsibility to fall on the shoulders of others. I think it's great for him. And, I agree with you with McVeigh. I think he's having his best season. You know, we're kind of we're a little bit spoilt for foremen,
Yes.
local foremen this year. You know, he's been excellent. And it'd be an interesting discussion, who's been the best foreman in the league. 'Cause his name's got to be in there, You think of him, you think of Chris, you think of Josh Bannon up in Brisbane. Yeah. Luke Travers is pretty handy too. So, there's a real strength in foremen in the NBL, local foremen. And I think you can certainly mount an argument that he's been the best of that group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and he just plays with such a love of the game. What I love about him. I just love how much he loves the game. I mean, he's just infectious. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had much to do with him, but I mean, you're playing professional sport, and a lot of guys get burdened by that pressure. But you can just tell that he loves what he's doing. It's great. It's great to see.
He comes across as being pretty nutty, doesn't he?
He does.
That's for sure. I've not had much to do with him. I remember seeing him up at the under-20 nationals several years ago when I was up there with Ian Stacker, and Ian coached him in the AIS, and he absolutely adored him, loved him, spoke really highly of him as a character. Again, may have mentioned him as being a little bit zany, but just huge personality. And that sort of thing can be infectious. They've got some quiet guys on that roster, so having a bit of an extrovert is really important. I've had rosters before where Mitch Creek has been the only sort of extrovert, and it puts a lot of pressure on that extrovert to sort of be the life of the party, to be the guy who gets other players up and whatnot. So he's certainly one of that. Steindel's obviously the captain of that team. He really shows lots of leadership attributes. And they're humming at the moment. They had a great weekend, and I'm intrigued to see how they follow it up this weekend.
I think Jack will be the next captain, won't he? I mean, it seems like an obvious fit.
We've retired his singlet, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, absolutely have. And
well, he's going to be captain then. I think he's a natural selection for that.
Yeah,
that's the next step in his growth as a player, is to take that officialdom and to run with it. And I think Tassie will be in a better spot when he's ready for that too.
Last thing on the JackJumpers, are they the biggest threat to the top 2 right now? Would you say that they're their biggest challenger if you had to pick one out?
Yeah, without a doubt. We've already seen the problems that they've given Melbourne United.
Yes.
As I think I mentioned earlier, I'd love to see them win their remaining games and boost that record, not be a 500 team.
And that includes a game with Perth too, which will be fascinating.
Yeah. But I think it'd just be great for the finals race to see that third team in there. And I'm not convinced that there's another team that can do it. So, I'll be rooting for the Jackies over the remainder of the season. And I'd love to see them spring an upset in a semi-final series.
Illawarra Hawks, they took a big step towards locking in a spot as well. They're up into 4th now. They've got to 12-12. They're 10-5 under Justin Tatum. It was an interesting game against the Bullets, though. I don't know if they were necessarily that impressive until the last 8 minutes of the game, where I think it was a combination of them locking in defensively and holding Brisbane to 6 points over those last 8 minutes, but also I think Brisbane coughing it up. We can get to the Bullets shortly, but did you like what you saw from the Hawks? How do you see them right now?
Yeah, I'm still not buying stock in them. It was a difficult game to ascertain. Was it the Hawks closing the game out, or Brisbane dribbling down their leg again? Yeah, it was just a difficult one. Look, it'd be a great story if they finish top 4. I mean, they definitely can. I mean, just through that maybe. I think Homer Simpson once said, "What's the greatest 2 words in the American language? Default." So, Yeah, look, it'd be a great story. I'd love to hear them sending a bouquet up the highway to the offices of the Sydney Kings if they did. I'm not sure I'm ready to declare they're looking good for a top 4 spot just yet, but they've given themselves a shot at it. And, Jason Tatum, what a story. 10-5. Look, they've got 2 huge games this week.
Yep.
I know we're going to cover the game a little bit, but if they can knock over New Zealand and then stick the slipper into the Kings up the highway, then we genuinely have to say, well, this is a top 4 team.
Absolutely. One big thing, Wani Swaka-Lobuluk was a starting defensive player basically on a Sydney Kings championship team. So we know what he's capable of, but I think he's right back to being at his defensive best again. He's done some great jobs, and I think the job he did on Nathan Sobey, and it wasn't just him, it was a team effort, but I think he led the charge. That Gary Clark has been terrific as well, so I'll get your thoughts on him too, but how key to their turnaround has Wani's defense been?
Yeah, I think he's improved greatly in that area, and I agree with you. I haven't gone back and watched it, but it was more of just a gut feeling. I thought he was really disappointing last year. I kind of had high hopes for him as that almost a Bull Qual type as a defender. He's got amazing length, great size, but I thought he was trying to be something maybe that he wasn't last year, trying to be a little bit more assertive at the offensive end. But I've really enjoyed the season this year. He's turned back the clock to being the player that I was forward to seeing. He's not stepping outside of his skill set, so he's become much more efficient at the offensive end. And his versatility at the defensive end is really big and important for Illawarra. They're not blessed with a lot of great defenders. So having someone who can guard the 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, and even the 4 if need be, because of his length and size, it's a great attribute. It's a great weapon to have, and he's fulfilling the role I think that they saw for him. And I tip my hat to him in the season he's had, and I hope to continue to see it now and hopefully into the finals as well.
No, I think you summed it up well. I remember when he first signed at Illawarra, I spoke to him and did a story on him, and he talked about how he did want the ball in his hands more. He wanted to become more of an offensive player, and I think maybe he lost focus of what his great strengths are, and that's being potentially the best defender in the league, and I think he's getting back close to that now, so I think you sort of summed it up well. Gary Clark's the other one I wanted to touch on. He's a mighty tough guy to stop, isn't he? He's got a lot of weapons. And more importantly, he's taking the pressure off Tyler Harvey from him feeling like he has to be the match winner on this team because he can be the match winner. What do you think of what Gary's doing?
He's had a really solid season. I thought he was maybe just solid to start the year.
Yep.
But I think as the season's progressed, he doesn't seem to have a big personality, and I don't say that as criticism. It's more that he seems to be that guy who's going to not impose himself, but just wait for his opportunities. And as the team has become more aware of his skill sets and where he needs the ball and needs his touches, then his game has started to blossom a little more. He's got inside-outside ability. I don't think we've seen the best of him from the perimeter yet either. I've watched a fair bit of him, and he can really light it up from behind the arc. And, right now, maybe the fear of the ride's more fearful than the actual result right now. But I think he takes a lot of pressure off a lot of his teammates. And Sam Folling as well, because Sam's not a particularly good post player, but, you throw the ball into Gary down there and you can expect pretty good results. So I think he fills a lot of holes for that team, and I'm really enjoying his season. And as I said, he just seems to have fit in really well. I hope Illawarra have been aggressive in trying to get him back for next year, and if not, I hope other teams are being aggressive because I'd love to see him continue to grow in our league. Yes,
absolutely. The team they beat, the Brisbane Bullets, they're frustrating me because they're so close to being a really good team, but they seem to blow these sort of games. I mean, they took control of this game against the Hawks in the third quarter. I think with 8 minutes to go, they were still leading by 4, and it felt like they were still in control of the game, and then they just disappeared. They scored 6 points in the last 8 minutes of the game, ended up losing by 13, so not only did they lose, but they lost some percentage as well, and their percentage is way less from... They're the only team from the teams they're now competing with for a playoff spot that's under 100, and they're well under 100. They're at 96, so... It's frustrating to watch because they're so close, but they just get tight late in games. What are you seeing from them?
Yeah, look, I've seen it all season long, really, with the fourth quarter fade-outs from this team. Nathan had a quiet night, and when he's having those quiet nights, where do you go? If you're just looking at the roster and going through the names, you say, well, Casey Prather, for sure.
Yep.
But he's clearly on restricted minutes and not getting the opportunities down the stretch to sort of assert himself. Appears that's going to be like that for the rest of the season in regards to his minutes. So
what about Chris Smith and Shannon Scott? They combined for 2 points for the entire game and 1 of 9 shooting. That's your 2 other imports.
Yeah, I've quit on them though. I personally don't expect anything from them. They've shown for the calendar year of 2024 that they're not up to NBL standard, and certainly in the system. So Smith has faded as the season's gone on, and Scott just never really found a role for himself after missing some games.
Yeah.
I'm sure both guys do have the ability, but that's not their persona on this team. Well, I shouldn't say that. Scott's probably never been that guy. He's more of a floor general, fill gaps kind of guy throughout his career in G League.
Yep.
He shared the floor with some really good players when he was playing for the Nets. And half those blokes have been in the NBL. The Tajir McCall and Mitch Creeks, and these guys of this caliber, where he's just played his role, and I think that's where he's most comfortable.
He did have a 30-point game with the Taipans last year, though, didn't he?
Yeah, he had that game where it was a little bit more of an outlier for him. It's not really who he is. Shot the ball exceptionally well that night, and there's a lot of guys who have had 30-point games that you probably don't rely on to turn that on too often. It's not who he is. And so, that's part of the puzzle for them moving forward. They can go as far as Nathan takes them, I think. We saw a little earlier in the year, Mitch Norton. He looked to be trying to be a bit more offensively aggressive. But he's never been a terribly efficient offensive player. So that's not really his bag. Smith, I'm sure they expected more from an offensive standpoint. He seems to get most of his stuff coming out of sets.
Yep.
Bann's the key to their future. They know what they've got they've got a really good one in him.
Yes.
And Harrison, whilst he's commanded that centre position, I'm not sure throwing the ball into him down the stretch of the game is where you're going to go for your results. So, I think it's just building pieces for Brisbane right now, and I'm not terribly surprised that they are where they are. I think where they're at right now, and look, they may fall into the playoffs, but they're going to be a sub-500 team and have a losing percentage.
Yep.
I wouldn't get carried away by getting into the postseason if they happen to. But their record, their season, I think as a whole is a genuine step in the right direction, and a solid base for them to build upon moving forward. This isn't their year. This is their year to sort of make assessments. Yep. Where are they at with Sobey? Is he the guy they want to build around? I think they've had really good returns in their recruitment of Sam McDaniel and Isaac White. Yep. I think we've already seen what's happened at the centre position, and they're going to move in a different direction there. So
I think they absolutely back in Harrison and Zakarsky for that next year, and I think Mitch Norton's been a great addition as well. Yeah, without a doubt. And I think if you team Sobey up with a point guard who is a genuine top 3 or 4 point guard in the NBL, we could see Brisbane take that next step next year. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think that's what we thought they were doing with Shannon Scott. It just hasn't worked out.
No, it hasn't. Not at all. Shannon's game sort of seemed to fall off a cliff a little once he incurred that injury, and he's not been the same player since. No. So it's sad. He's a guy that I was really impressed with last year. He played above the level that I thought he would at Cairns, and I was excited to see what he could do with Brisbane this year, but it hasn't quite panned out for either club nor player.
I want to get your thoughts on the throwdown. It sounds like a funny thing to say, but I was more impressed with what the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix did than Melbourne United, and they're the team that ended up losing. And we found out that Mitch Creek was going to be out as well, on top of Gary Brown and Alan Williams and Craig Moller and Matt Kenyon. They did get Abdul Nader back, and he looked pretty good. He tried to take over the game in the 18 minutes he was out there, but he couldn't stay out there. Like we talked about last week, he's struggling to adjust to playing in the NBL. It looked like it was going to blow out in the third quarter. I was convinced it was going to become a 40-plus point game, but they showed a lot of heart to fight back and do what they did in the fourth quarter. What did you make of what they did? Basically, a team of kids up against the league leaders.
Yeah, I thought the Phoenix, you got out of them about what you would hope to get from the standpoint. I thought the final score was quite generous to Southeast Melbourne. You mentioned there that it looked like it could really. I think Melbourne got up by maybe just around that 30-point mark, maybe just a little under in that third quarter. And, you know, I thought Dean was quite gentlemanly about the way he coached, and he let some of his players get plenty of rest. You know, they had a good enough lead, a solid enough platform to run with some little used players down the stretch, and the Phoenix were able to peg back the lead a little bit. And so, yeah, I think both teams would walk out of that game reasonably happy in the sense that Southeast were able to have another look at some of these kids for next year. They would be happy that they didn't watch that 30-point deficit turn into a 50-point loss, which would have been pretty heartbreaking. And, you know, to continue to build that competitive edge that we've seen the last two rounds from Southeast, which I think is far more important than the results right now. I mean, the results clearly don't matter for them, but just you don't want to see them putting in some of those performances we saw in early January where it was really head-scratching and guys looked like they'd quit on their season. But they've been able to turn it around, and that's what you want. Melbourne came out of the game with a solid, comfortable, near-dominant performance. And any time, you know, with the luck that they've had, they can come off the floor with everybody in one piece.
Yes.
I think they're pretty happy with the result.
Yep, absolutely. All right, before we take our last break, let's update our look at the run home. So we've now only got 2 weeks to go. Are you happy to rule out the Phoenix, the 36ers and the Taipans from this race?
I very much am happy. I implore everyone to rule them out. You can't be that many games under 500 and fall into the final. That's not healthy for the league. Yes, let's put them off.
So we won't worry about them. Cairns and Adelaide are 11 and 15, so we don't want those sort of records taking part in postseason action. So let's start with the Breakers. They've got 4 games to go. They're 11 and 13 now. They've got the Hawks at home, Melbourne away, Brisbane at home, Adelaide away. How many of those 4 would you give them?
Well, I'm going to be really generous, and I'm not going to take too much consideration for Anthony Lamb's injury. Clearly, if I say they're going to win 3, but I think they're a chance to win 3.
Yep.
I want them to win 3.
Yep.
I think I might be overstating what they have lost or understating what they've lost by giving them 3 wins in that final 4 games. They've got a tough weekend ahead. The Illawarra game is going to really determine their season for them, I think.
Yep.
The pre-final, final, going back to play Melbourne, sitting back in their lazy boys on a Sunday afternoon is going to be difficult.
Yes. And
then you'd like to think they're a good chance to get Brisbane at home. And then that Adelaide game, geez, that's going to be, that's the one. That's the one for them. If they get that one, they're going to sneak in.
That has a DJ Vasiljevic 40-point game written all over it, doesn't it?
It may very well do. But look, they've got Isaiah Liafa, who's a strong physical guard who can get into someone like DJ and hopefully cause him some problems, because I really would like to see New Zealand sneak into the playoffs.
What do you reckon, though? 2? 2 of those 4?
I'm giving them 2 with a chance of a 3rd.
Okay. We'll go up to Brisbane. They've only got 2 games to go, so they're 12 and 14. They've got Adelaide at home, then New Zealand away.
I've got them splitting.
Yep. So that'll have them equal on New Zealand, and they'll miss out on percentage because they're 96 points on the plus-minus behind them. They're not going to make that up. Sydney Kings, we haven't talked about them. They're as frustrating as anybody. So they've got Illawarra at home, Southeast Melbourne away. How many of those 2 do they get?
1.
Yep.
They're going to get Phoenix.
Yep.
On the road. I'm backing in Coach Tatum for the win.
Yep. Well, let's go straight to his team. They're 12 and 12. They've also got 2 double headers over the last 2 rounds. So they've got New Zealand away, then Sydney away in that game. Then they've got Perth at home, who they've done so well against, and then Melbourne away. So if you give them the Sydney game, how many of the other 3 might they get?
Yeah, I've got New Zealand getting them at home.
Yep.
I've got Melbourne beating them. I think their big game's going to be that matchup against Perth. Yeah, that's the big one. Coming off a great performance, they've got every reason to believe that they can do it. Perth have hit a bit of a road bump Geez, wouldn't it be one hell of a story to see Illawarra
it would.
in the finals after the start they had, and again to send that bouquet up the road to Sydney. So I'd love to see them play in the finals in a playing game. That'd be great.
Do you give it to them? Do you give them 14 or 13? What do you reckon?
I'm going to give them 13.
I think that'll still be enough. So based on all this, Brisbane will be the ones that miss out. The JackJumpers, so they're already basically locked into that third spot because of their percentage, but they've got the Phoenix away, and then they've got the Wildcats at home. How many of those two would you give them?
They get their brooms out. I think they're good for tomorrow right there. Yeah, I thought we saw a really good performance this weekend. Obviously, Southeast is a tough matchup for them, no matter who is on that Southeast team.
Mm-hmm.
It's a team, that franchise they've only ever beaten twice.
Yes.
And Southeast have thrown some ragtag teams out there against them in the past and been able to get over the top. So I think this time they might be just stretching it a little too far with the players missing those. So I'll get them over the top of Southeast, and I think they'll get Perth at home.
Yeah, 16 and 12 would be a great record to see them finish on, and that's probably the sort of record we expect to see someone finishing third with. The top two, I mean, they're pretty much locked into where they are already. But the Wildcats, they're 16 and 9, so they've got their last home game against Cairns and then a road double next week, Illawarra and Tasmania. You give them the Hawks game already. Do they beat Cairns at home? And what about the JackJumpers? Well, they don't get the JackJumpers, so do you give them the game against Cairns?
Well, again, look, I do like the matchups. I like the personnel that Cairns can push out against them, but no, I think you just got to play the odds on this one and say, well, Perth haven't been terribly impressive at home in recent times. They're surely got to be slightly above 50-50 against Cairns. So I'm going to give them just the nod. I think Bryce is probably ready to break the shackles. I'd love to see more plays run for him.
Yep.
You know, after timeouts, don't run it for Doolittle. Don't run a play for Doolittle, start the game. Run them for Bryce. Every chance you get that ball in his hands. And, I think that's the way to move forward for them. We've seen that throughout the year. I think Bryce is ready to go. I think they dropped the game against Tassie to finish the year, though. So, they'll win 2 more.
Yep. Melbourne, they're not quite guaranteed a top spot, but just about are. So they've got New Zealand. They wait for New Zealand on Sunday. Then they've got Cairns away, which will be fascinating. That's the fascinating one out of these last 3 for me. Then they finish against the Hawks. How many do you think they get?
I'm going to give them the New Zealand game. They're going to be sitting back and waiting on that one. Cairns' season will be over at that point. Whether they come with the fire that they've had against Melbourne previously, we'll have to wait and see. These men are professionals, and we'd like to think that they'll come out as not even so much a spoiler, but just with personal pride and wanting to do their best. So that could be 50-50 game. I think they beat Illawarra. So, I'm going to go with 2 wins.
Yep. All right, there we go. So, I reckon as far as if that all plays out, so Melbourne will stay top, Perth second, Tasmania third, and then it'll go down to percentage, and I reckon, so based on all of that percentage, it'll be tight. So right now, the Hawks will sneak in, Sydney will sneak in, the Breakers will sneak in. Would you be pretty happy with that top 6?
I'd be accepting of it. I know I'll be happy with some of my team sneaking in. Yeah, look, my interest will certainly be at the top 3. I would love to see an Illawarra-Sydney playing game. I think there'd be some entertainment value there. If you had to ask me at the 6 minutes into the game at RAC Arena the other night, I would have been saying I think New Zealand could make a run. With Anthony Lamb now sidelined, I think New Zealand can still make a run to make finals. I don't think they're going to make a run in the finals. I don't think they're going to win the series. So I've lost a little enthusiasm to see them do it, but I'd love to see them make it. So, it's the Illawarra-Sydney game I'd love to see, and then I'll be focused on the top 3 teams.
Yep. All right, let's take our last break, Simon, and when we come back, we'll get your Galen winner, and then we'll preview the 6 games to come this weekend.
He'll make it for sure. That's why I backed him on TABtouch.
You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. I'm here with Simon Mitchell. Before we get to our Preview of round 19, Simon. Your Galen winner for this week. We spoke about him a little bit earlier in the show, but we might be going to a big man from Tasmania, are we?
Yeah, we definitely are. I've got wonderful Will Magnay. Just the different ways that he imposed himself in the game. Obviously, took a couple of hits to the ribs during the weekend.
Oh, especially from Jim McCall, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, there was that one. He caught one in the game before as well. And, I like the way he went about his weekend. I thought he was tremendously impressive. Did all the little things to help his team succeed. And what I really admire is like when you cop something like that in the ribs is that you continue to roll hard at the rim and present yourself, and he continues to. And, that's something to be proud of, that genuine toughness. And I thought, well, that for me gets him the Galen Award this round.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Couldn't be happy with that choice. And by the time we get to the end of next week, Simon, we're going to have to work out how we decide the winner for the whole season as well. But we'll get through one more round and then we'll figure that out. Preview of round 19. Thanks to TABtouch. So check out the odds at tabtouch.com.au or on the TABtouch app. Starts with a doubleheader Friday night. We talked about this game a little bit earlier, Simon, but I'm fascinated to see how you think it'll play out. New Zealand Breakers, Illawarra Hawks. Basically, the winner will go a long way to cementing themselves in the top 6. The loser makes their life a little bit more difficult. What do you think?
Well, certainly if Illawarra win, I think they've just about put the kibosh on New Zealand. But I think the Breakers at home. I know New Zealand that Illawarra have had a little bit of success against New Zealand, even during the very tough times.
Even a Tyler Harvey game winner last season.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They had no reason to win any games at all, and his guys out injured and up against it. But they found a way against New Zealand down there. And but I don't see history repeating itself. Not in round 19. I've got the Breakers.
Second up on Friday night, Brisbane Bullets, their last home game of the season, so I think they're expecting a sellout at Nissan Arena again, so the public in Brisbane are getting behind their team. Adelaide 36ers, they've probably fallen out of contention now under Scott Ninnis, but he's done a great job. The Bullets need to win. They have to win to keep their season alive. Do they do it?
I think there's more to play for Adelaide than the playoffs.
Yep.
I think they are genuinely playing hard for their coach and each other. And I don't think the loss against Tasmania last week and the unlikeliness of them making postseason action is going to diminish their spirit. I'm going to back them in on this one. I think they've got some... They started the season in Brisbane.
Yeah, they did.
I think they
scored the first 15 points of the game. They did.
Exactly. And I feel like there must be a feeling in that group that, like, come on, man, we've got to get these guys. We owe them one. And they've got the mojo right now to pull it off.
They did beat them on Christmas Eve as well.
That's right. And so I'm going to back them in Brisbane to ruin the party for the people of Brisbane, unfortunately.
Yep. There we go. Justin won't be too happy with you.
I now say that Brisbane will win. Sorry, Justin. I wasn't thinking of Juzzy. I was thinking more about the non-performance of some of the players on that roster.
No, absolutely.
And alternatively, Adelaide have got their big guns firing at the moment, so I just feel like Adelaide's going to get it done.
I just hope Trey Kell's healthy enough to play. He was very lucky to play that game on Sunday, so hopefully he's right to play. Saturday, another doubleheader. Fascinating. I mean, you've touched on it before. The Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, for whatever reason, match up really well against the Tasmania JackJumpers. Do you give them any chance?
Not really. No, I think the Jackies have got to get this one. This is one where we put history away, and I think that we'll just go with common sense and say that the Jackies have got a really good roster they're going to put on the floor. The Phoenix are missing far too many players. Again, I go back to the last round. We want to see a spirited event from the Phoenix. And hopefully it's a bit of more of a prettier game than what we saw back on Christmas or Boxing Day.
No, Christmas Day was not pretty.
Christmas Day, it wasn't a pretty game to watch. And it looks like Tassie's broken those shackles that they imposed on themselves at that time of the year. So I'm going with the Jackies.
Second up, the Perth Wildcats, the Cairns Taipans. This is fascinating. So the Taipans I don't think they're a team you want to play when they've got a free hit. They're a team that has a lot of self-belief, a lot of self-confidence, and I think they'll come out with a point to prove. The Wildcats need to start to get back to their better form as well. So this is an interesting one.
Yeah, look, there's been a few players down for Cairns. I'm concerned with Sam Wardenberg's form. He signed that contract as a great investment. He's a great player, but he really hasn't found his mojo at the offensive end this year. And I thought he had a pretty poor game last round. It was really up to sort of their two big guns in Patrick Miller and Tajir McCall to sort of carry the weight for that team. So, they need some more output from guys like Wardenberg, some more production out of a Menenga and to get over Perth Wildcats. I'm going for Perth at home on this one. I hope I went for Perth when we were talking through the ladder. But, I'm going for Perth in this one. I think they can get this one done.
I think you did. Two more games on Sunday. Melbourne United first up against the New Zealand Breakers. I don't know what the Breakers have done, but they seem to always get these ones where they come up against a fresh team on the Sunday. They've played on the Friday, but they don't make excuses. They'll come out and give this everything still, but can they get over the line against a fresh Melbourne?
I think the Melbourne will get this one. I thought they were pretty professional against South East Melbourne. Some good signs there. They've had a bit of a rough run in recent times. But, I think the fresh legs, the travel for New Zealand will be a bit of an issue. I think Melbourne will take care of their business at home.
As you've talked about a few times this year, the Sydney Kings have a mortgage on this about being fresh and waiting for their opponents on a Sunday afternoon for this last game of a round, and they're at home waiting for the Illawarra Hawks, who would have come back from playing in New Zealand on the Friday night. But based on what we talked about before, you give the Hawks a hell of a good chance.
Yeah, I do. I'm not impressed at all with the Sydney Kings. I think they've really let themselves down this season. I would love to see Illawarra get this one and lock themselves a playoff spot. Again, I don't know how I went a little earlier, but I know that...
You did give it to them earlier.
Yeah, I just feel like the Kings, for me, are not playing for a playoff spot. I don't know if they've got the fight and the hunger for me, from what I've seen for too long in 2024. They've certainly got the talent, and they can easily turn it on any given night, as we saw against Melbourne United a couple of rounds back. But I think the Illawarra Hawks spirit is going to get them through the weekend. Now, they've got the travel coming in from New Zealand, but I think they've got a little something going on there, and it might just get them over the line.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. I mean, having that hunger, they've got the hunger. The Kings have shown that they don't, so sometimes that can overcome a lot of things. So, all right, Simon, we'll wait and see how that all plays out. It's going to be fascinating. I think by Sunday night we'll pretty much know who the top 6 teams will be, I imagine. So we're going to find out a lot about every team. Thank you for breaking that all down with me once again. Thanks for finding the time this week, and I hope everyone enjoys listening and enjoys what we're about to see. So thank you to Hoop 7 and to TABtouch for making this possible. I'm Chris Pike. I'll sign off there and let you finish off, Simon, with whatever final thoughts you might have.
Final thoughts I've got. I think it's when we get guys who get reported and we get a little bit of a brief that's sent out by the NBL, I think you should maybe come with some video, and so we can actually break down the incident, so we can actually ascertain what they've written as to what we're seeing and whether or not they're matching up. Because when I saw the reports come through from the last round, what's considered deliberate and what's considered non-deliberate or accidental or careless or whatever other words they come up for, I found myself scratching my head a little bit. So, again, we want to open up the game to as much as we can. We're really quick to put microphones in timeouts. We want to get in the locker rooms and interview players. The league is very, very progressive in that manner. Maybe they open up their own doors a little bit and let us peek in and see how they come to some of these conclusions, because I thought, there seemed to be a little bit of an anomaly between what I saw and what I read. So I'd love to see that opened up next year.
Well, just very quickly, fascinating that you bring that up. So I think you're referring to both McCall and Magnay for what they were charged with from that game up in Cairns. So what the league sent out about McCall, the panel deemed the incident as careless, medium impact and low contact. And then later on, Magnay's was deemed intentional medium impact and low contact. those are just words to me. I think we need to actually see what they're talking about to know what they're referring to, don't we?
100%. And, we know they get their box and they cross-check, what's this mean, and they put a numerical figure to the fine, and it's garbage. We want to see it in video, explain it, because without a shadow of a doubt, Ian McCall turned his shoulder and made contact. Magnay, yes, it was careless. I didn't think it was that well disguised as a deliberate act. Now, I'm not saying we throw the book at him either. It was a nice little rattler. It certainly got his attention. I'm not here to try and get blokes suspended or anything like that. But what I saw was two very similar incidents, and they weren't adjudicated the same. So I'd love a little bit of clarification.
Yep, I think we all would. But for now, Simon, let's say goodbye for good this time. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you having me on again, Chris. Thank you.
He'll make it for sure. Now that's why I backed him on TABtouch.
Hey, Luke.
Yes, Gene Simmons?
He's probably the best when it comes to this stuff.
Thanks, Gene.
You've got the touch. You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.